Spelljammer! Felt appropriate.
Hello, and welcome to the DM's Book Club, a podcast where we talk about all kinds of things. We know them all inside out, especially today's topic, about Dungeons and Dragons, and we include it in our role-playing campaign. With me, as always, on a wonderful Thursday night is Hamilton. Hello, Hamilton. How are you?
Hello. Hi, Fiona. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Very good. Currently, whilst we're recording this, I am in the States still. I'm working out how to get home. But that doesn't matter. So I've got a lot of time on my hands to do that and to read lots of D&D stuff. Obviously, again, the day we're recording this, Strixhaven even has come out.
It has.
It's so exciting. I can't wait to go to the game shop tomorrow to go get my alt cover. But I've been looking through that, so I'm very, very excited. What about yourself, Hamilton? How have you been?
How have I been? I have been good. We had the first of our Dragon's Duel Season 3 shows on Saturday night, which was
amazing.
A lot of fun. It was good to be back. I was like... It's kind of funny, like I played lots of D&D in the sort of break that we've had. Like I played Curse of Strahd and all that stuff, but you know, I just got really excited before. I was like, geez, you know what? I'm actually really looking forward to just playing some stupid game show games. Do you know what I mean? Like not playing D&D, not getting Curse of Strahd to pieces, just like playing stupid shit. And that's what we did, and it was good fun. And we had it was like. We're making characters for an actual player that's going to go alongside it. So the first two characters, they had some. They were because there's two actual players we're going to do. There's two people on each team making one character that they're going to share, but like be split personality, right? So we did this didn't tell them until like the end that they're going to roll two classes so that they can. So once they've got obviously they get their scores and all the stats through the game show, which they did very well. And then it got to the end, so like you roll one class and they were like, oh, I'm really upset about this, and I was like, well, now you have to roll your second class for the other half of your personality. And one person like got a bard and they were like, they had a 20 in Christmas, they're like, that's good. And then they when they came to roll the second time, they got bard again. And so someone in the chat like said, I'm spending money, because you can spend bits like cheers to re-roll. So they said, re-roll it, bard again. It was like freaking heck, these just could not. It was like meant to be. It was like the universe was saying.
The stars and the dice aligned. And
the name of
amazing.
Their character is called Hamilton. I can see what they did there. Can you see what they did there? I can see what they did there.
Just about.
Yeah, I thought it was hilarious. But they're a bard, a halfling bard, who's pretty strong, pretty charismatic, which makes so much sense. Look at these. Guns.
hey, art imitates life, or life?
Yes, exactly.
Art, that's.
I feel like I need to go work out just to
work out your musical prowess.
Oh well, I can do that.
Yeah. Oh, go on.
Oh, did you not hear that? Here we go.
Oh, right. I thought you were gonna bring it. Ah, yeah.
Can you hear that?
Yes, we can hear that. Oh my god! Even hiding this from our.
Okay, I won't do too much. That's all I can do.
Oh well, that's another stream entirely now. Are you hiding that from me? God,
well, you didn't know that I could play guitar.
No.
This room is literally 1, 2, 3, 4 guitars, and then the drum kit.
I know. I only ever see the drum kit.
It's true.
Well, Hamilton.
Nico, sorry, you can cut all that out.
No, we're not cutting all that out. I am now reeling in shock from that realization. But today, Hamilton, what is our topic of choice? What are we talking about today?
What are we talking about today? Well, we are talking about none other than the amazing 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons campaign setting called Spelljammer. Yeah. Yes.
Exactly. Yes. A little bit of context behind this. We've had some comments on a previous episode which said we didn't do enough research into a topic of the GIF, and we're like, you know what? You are right. So now we're going to go back and look at the original sort of Spelljammer setting that just sort of set it all off, because as we've sort of spoken about in a previous episode, there is very likely it's going to be re-released next year for the
Sounds like it.
So we thought, you know what? We don't know anything about it. Why don't we go back and check? And I guess our first impressions is it's pretty good.
It's pretty darn good. It's pretty awesome sauce. I can't think of a better term for it than it's so much fun. And as a massive Planescape fan, it's not quite pushed it off the ledge, because it just can't quite. Because I think that's always going to be my favourite. But it's pretty much neck and neck at the moment. It's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously this was originally designed by Jeff Grubb, and it was just basically this idea when they were sort of pitching things back in the 1980s to TSR. Like, the pitch was, what about D&D but in space?
Yeah.
And I think that's the key thing, because I got this wrong as well, because to me, I was like, oh, it's just another science fiction sort of setting, whatever. It's not, per se. It is about taking the world as is, acknowledging that magic exists, and then putting it, how do we get into these other worlds, how do we do it into space? And what I loved in some of the sort of the forward of one of these books, it says like, how do we explain how things happen? It's like, it's magic, and it knows it's magic. And I thought, what a great sentence.
It is such a great sentence. That whole Jeff Grubb's initial intro to the book is one of the best pieces of writing I've read, and I loved it. Just the whole the product you're holding in your hand is a result of a brainstorming session held at a local Lake Geneva restaurant. And you just can imagine it, can't you? Just all these people going like, hey, we want... And they said, like, Cloister to come up with some new ideas and alternatives for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, it was called in those days. And I'm just like, how much would you pay to be there and be a part of that? But, like, at that time, what an awesome experience that must have been. And, and that whole intro is beautiful, really.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's interesting because obviously now, because it's such a big company, obviously Wizards of the Coast, and they have all these teams, all these writers on it. So the voice itself maybe becomes a bit more unified per se. But here, like reading that forward and reading the rest of the two books as well, which will go on to sort of the differences between them for this box set, the voice is there and it's incredibly engaging. As if somebody is actually talking to you. I can imagine this being read out as an audiobook. And just almost like... And maybe it's just me on this, but sometimes when I was reading it, it felt very much like Douglas Adams, just the way it explains things in the sense of like, this happens because of this, and you're like, oh, that's quite funny what you've just said.
Yeah.
Just the way, like for example, it talks about like gravity planes, and it was talking about like a good sort of aim. You could throw like an object on one side of the plane, and it would come back and hit somebody else in the head.
I like that. So over the barge, and then it go, bonk.
Exactly. So, but that's the thing. Like I don't think you get that with a lot of 5th edition stuff. Obviously, we've got stuff like Fizzbands, and we've got Tashas, and sort of Van Richten, and they have little like interludes per se.
That's
it's just something different. And I actually didn't realize that books used to be like this in a way. Maybe that was, again, my ignorance showing through there, but I was just like, wow, it actually really is an engaging read, because I sometimes find
that at the on the Planescape one as well, when you did the small bit on that, and I said, and that when we definitely have to do a big special on Planescape, because I don't need to read anything for that one, so that's really easy for me. But the point is, like, I have a theory. I'm gonna put a theory down there. So one of them is, I think, like, they are like really high concept, so you really kind of can go for it. And I think that's what they were doing at the time. They're trying to push the boundaries of the game, so therefore bringing that speech to it. But also reading the Lost Ships one, which is the one that Ed Greenwood did. And I know that it wasn't Ed Greenwood who designed the whole thing, which is like awkward Twitter interaction. But hi, Ed, if you're watching, because thank you for talking to me. But in the Lost Ships one, he does an intro as Elminster, and there was a lot more of that in that day, I think. And it was just, and I think my theory is less of a graphical design lean, So, Planescape actually is a lot more graphical than this. And I was trying to figure out if I didn't actually get to the bottom of it, and someone out there might be able to answer this for me, but I think Planescape is the first campaign setting to be full color as a book. Which I think is kind of important, because it's the early 90s, and I think and it might have been Adventures, but these are all black and white drawings, black and white text, and therefore you need to bring that flavor, and you need to bring those, because the art's good, it's not, but it's just not what we are blessed with art these days. We're everything. Even DM's Guild books have more art than Spelljammer main campaign setting does. Yeah. And that's perfect, and that's because
you're
of
right.
printing.
Like we talked about it before, that idea of the page textures and stuff like that. That every page has been built up and the text on top of it having that sort of invoking feelings. Obviously, we had that with Wild Beyond the Witchlight, we've had that with Fizz Bands, we've had them with all of them. And yeah, with this one, you get the obviously, I know we're not going to skip out on those ships, folks. Do not worry. Because again, those illustrations by Jim Holloway are amazing, and those are in color. But yeah, the actual book itself is just as if printed from a black and white thing. So absolutely, completely agree with you there.
And that's understandable, because it was the late 80s and they didn't have the same printing technology. That's the days when you used to do, which I've done some of this, Xeroxing, and I'm saying Xeroxing in to make images in depth and stuff like that. So like that's what you had to do in those days, whilst we now could just digitally art it for everything. And even in the 90s, you had computer graphics and you had much better layout, Quark and Express and all that stuff to make programs. So to make documents. And so I think that's why there's a need for that law. And I think that kind of puts the pressure on people to feel like, I really need to get this across. I really need to push the experience and the emotional quality that I'm trying, the sort of atmosphere I'm trying to get across. And I think that's why the Planescape one's great, so it's got its own cant, its own way of speaking. But this one there's a lyrical quality, as you said, in some of the words that he uses. And I think if Jeff Gruber's the one who actually wrote most of the text, I assume.
I believe so, yes.
Their penmanship is really well put, is really good, and there's lovely, as you said, there's humour, but there's also this. You had that quote about the spheres. I can't remember what you said that quote was.
Oh yes, they talked about essentially all of our planets and solar systems are encapsulated with these crystal spheres, and they are sort of float in the phlogiston, which we'll talk about, like quarks on an ocean, ginormous quarks, but quarks all the same. And I'm just like. Again, you get that image instantly.
Exactly,
like you've seen quarks bobbing in water. So this idea that these huge, great big spheres of crystal are bobbing in this huge sort of ocean of phlogiston. It's just
and that's it. And I think exactly. And there was even, we'll get on to some of the other ones, the sphere worlds, but like there's a lot of imagery in like they do the sphere that's very much like Discworld, with it's a world on top of a turtle, on top of an elephant, and it's all the way down. And they've got they say a god holding the earth, and you just imaginally see Atlas. You've got that, and it's just
carrying it through space.
And it's beautiful. It's just so well put together. Yeah,
it is. And before we go on to it, I'll just quickly explain something, because I got caught out by this because I'm an idiot. So in this the Adventures in Space box set, there are two books. Yes.
Yes.
There are two books. The Concordance of Arcane Space and the Lorebook of the Void. Now, the PDF that I got swapped those two around, so I did not understand the first book until the Lorebook, and it does say in the Concordance of Arcane Space, read this first. And I suggest you do, because I was talking to Hamilton, I was like, I don't really get it, blah, blah, blah. And then I turn over to the next page, I was like, now it makes a lot more sense.
Page 109 of the document they give you as a single PDF, it goes, read this first. You're like, that's useful.
Like you can tell, but obviously I know most quick start and most box sets now do say, like, if you're reading read this first. They usually say it at the top, or they go, stop, make sure you read this first. So I think that was the only thing. I was just like, again, I know obviously if it was separate books and all that sort of thing, then I would have been fine. But it's because again, I read everything in PDFs now because I don't have money to spend on physical copies per se. But so those are the two books. So the Concordance of Arcane Space explains the general rules for conducting second edition D&D games in space, and then the Lorebook explains a bit more about the races, the monsters you may encounter, and just all the other things there. So it sort of builds upon this sort of transition between these D&D as it in these worlds to space. And I think this is the key thing as well, because you sort of mentioned it as well. And I think this idea that they talk about previous settings, so they talk about Kryn, they talk about Greyhawk and stuff, and like how that fits. And the most important thing they say is that these worlds and Spelljammer coexist. One does not overwhelm the other. So I think, and that to me is very important, because I've always ever thought, oh, Spelljammer, you're just always in space. You maybe visit a planet or two, but whatever. But actually, the people on the ground, they know that there are huge ships in the sky. And it's not like a what is that sort of
what
thing.
is?
Like, well, but then there'll be a crash and stuff. But they just like, it doesn't concern them, because they translate it into like, if there's a big battle going on in the sky, it's just like armies fighting down here and stuff. And I like the idea that you don't have to go through that whole thing going, oh, aliens. It's just like, oh yeah, we know. And it's just a part, like, and I think he talks about it with like Elminster as well, saying like, oh, we're very aware of it, and it just makes it so seamless that you don't have to have that really awkward. You know, we've all been there with that. You have a board games night, and you spend the first hour reading the bloody board game rules to other people and get everyone on board. And none of that here. So I think that's just the key thing to just say is that Spelljammer coexists, and what I love about it, it gives the DM lots of tools to be like, here's how it works. And if you're worried about something, up to your discretion to be like, actually, it doesn't work like that, and that's okay, which I think is so important now. And then just quickly, just to say, as well in this box set, you get 4 maps. You get a giant picture of the Spelljammer, which I'm sure we'll come on to later, because I, again, didn't know this existed either. Again, naive person here. An example of basically a flying city called the Rockabral, and loads of little cards so that you can play like an actual sort of like little minis game.
Yeah.
Oh,
which,
so cool.
Can I just make a little interlude here?
Please do.
Back to our Future of D&D panel special. They said there will be more ways to play.
Oh, are you thinking like
I'm thinking a miniatures game. I'm thinking they're talking Spelljammer, and I'm thinking, okay, now if I wanted to go full on, hello, I'm going to get my tin hat on, they're going to make a deal with Games Workshop, and they're going to make a whole proper game, and they're going to get a box set, but I think they could go very box. I think they could go, if they so wished, get on the Games Workshop sort of bandwagon, because I think people are doing really well with that as now. Get a big box with some miniatures in there, proper spellship miniatures, because we could just 3D print the crap out of these things now, because I want to do that, and have a proper board game, you know, like when we can get back to playing together, or a Spelljammer online game even as well. I'm just thinking, like, that just came to mind, that sort of new ways to play. Well, that just sort of shouted at me when I was seeing the miniatures. Sort of thing.
That's actually such a good idea, because obviously we have stuff like is it Star Wars X-Wing and stuff like that, where they have all the like very miniature stuff, and you have the exact angle where things have to move and stuff.
It's a really good game, actually. I've not played. I've watched people play it. I've never played it.
It's a bit too technical for my blood, but I do like, that's how I see it, right? Because obviously it talks about, like, you know, these rules for like how do you fight in space and all that sort of thing, and and you have the hex maps and stuff like that. So that could be who knows, maybe because obviously we've got like D&D board games already, so maybe a war miniatures game. I love that idea.
Yeah, I seriously could see that. Yeah, because they do. I mean, they did do like they've done a lot of the board games of some of the key adventures, haven't they? And I think, but I just could, I think that seemed a bit obvious to me. But I mean, who knows? Who knows what they'll do? Video game.
Who knows? Well. Yeah. Oh, maybe. But I would love to see that, actually, and there'll be money in that for sure. For sure. So then, I guess, go on.
No, I was saying so.
So we're both like, so great. So let's go on to the first book, the Concordance of Arcane Space. Now I think there's 5 chapters in it. 5 chapters and 3 appendages.
There are 3 appendages.
Oh no. So it talks about the main rules and stuff. And again, in the foreword, it talks about this laws of magic and not physics. And you treat the worlds that have been described previously with magic, races, and gates as real, and you build out from there. And I think that's such a key thing. So looking at the first chapter, again, we're just going to do a huge, broad overview, so to speak, if anything that sort of goes out. So it talks about what the setting is. Like, how do you set up from this? And this idea that there is wild space, phlogiston, and these the crystal shells, or the spheres, or orbs.
Yeah, crystal spheres, I think, is
It's the main one.
It's the term.
And so this, and so it changes because why not? But this idea that obviously wild space is all that it's bits between little planets and stuff like that. You know, when you fly out of the atmosphere, that's the stuff you are in, and then you might hit the edges of the. If you think about our solar system, you get. You know, I still think Pluto is a planet. I'm sure it got reclassified at some point. When you sort of hit that outer edge, you might hit what is called the crystal shell. This idea of a dark ceramic, like endless sort of tile, which could be any shape per se. But obviously, when you get to it, because it's so immense, it's just flat and usually dark. And I think at some point it talked about like painted stars or stars being painted on the outside, which again is like very Truman Show in my head. It's
that's exactly what came to my mind. I was like. Where is that? Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
Like good afternoon, good evening, and good night. And then on the outside, there's this thing called the phlogiston, which is like this multicolored sort of like flow, essentially, which is in between these crystal shells. And to get from one planetary system to another, you have to bypass this sort of crystal shell, navigate the flow, and get into another one. And that's essentially it as sort of thing. But what I loved about the phlogiston, again, it has this, it's multicolored, it's fluorescent, it's bright, you don't need candles, but also there's just a little bit where it just says dangerously flammable.
Yeah.
So but I love those words because then instantly it changes a lot. Because I don't know about you, Hamilton, fire gets used a lot in D&D.
It does.
Like smoke powder, like lighting stuff and everything like that. So what's cool about it, because it instantly sort of says, oh, all right, you are going to travel to another plane or through a crystal shell, and then this stuff, how do you navigate that? So they have stuff like, you have maybe natural lighting from fungus or something like that in the ships itself. There are spells, I think like chill fire and stuff like that, which only works in the phlogiston. So I like that only you have certain spells, wizards and priest spells and cleric spells. Here's a question for you, Hamilton, and again, maybe it's just me. Priests are clerics, right? In the old, is that the thing, or is it a separate class? Oh, you don't know.
I don't know. Oh dear, should I find out now quickly?
You could do that. I mean, yeah, go for it. Because at times it does refer to clerics and then priests. I assume it is the same class, because basically, as we'll go into it, sort of talking about like how does one move a ship once it's in space, and it's through the spell jamming helm, which we'll go on to. But I get, again, and only certain races who have spellcasting abilities have it, and I think a priest can do it. So in my head,
priest is someone who worships a god. So all clerics are priests, but all priests are clerics. Anyone who can worship a god and teach about them, but only the most devout followers who go out to actually make a difference get clerical powers. That's from Crazy Cool Celt on the internet, but I think that's the
Crazy
point.
Cool Celt.
Thank you, but it's just So a cleric is someone who's got is a priest is an NPC stat block, and a cleric is a player character.
Well, there you go. So again, more you know.
Thank you, Crazy Cool Celt.
Thank you. And other things that it sort of talks about in this chapter, it talks about what do you do about air, so rules about air, gravity, what time and temperature, which I quite liked as well. This idea that the time, like how do you work out time? It's like, well, it's just relative to you, because obviously, that's how you keep. If you know what you're keeping, then you could be like, it's been 10 months, but actually it's been 2 weeks on this planet and all that sort of thing. So it's again, I quite like that. Again, it gives that control to the DM, because obviously people are going to have these questions. We all have those questions, like, how do you breathe in space? And it's like, well, you take some of your air with you for a little bit of time, so you'll be okay, but you can't live forever out there.
No, exactly. I do know it's 1d20 rounds for a human. So if you're on your own in space, you got 1d20 rounds, and a round, as I said to you off camera, a round in old D&D is 1 minute. A turn is 10 minutes. Not like in D&D where a turn is 6 seconds and a round is however long.
However many people are in it.
People in a round. So it's just those are technical terms from D&D, AD&D. Yeah, turn.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've got, again, like this idea of the gravity plate. And what I quite liked about it is it's just very matter-of-factly, like, here is what an issue might be, because we're now in space. And it talks about it, and then it will give an example, or a humorous example. So like I've already mentioned, the gravity planes one, this idea that most ships have 2 planes of gravity, one going up and one going down. And like the fact you could walk on the underside of a ship to repair it and stuff like that. And then there's this beautiful sort of like in-between plane where if you threw something, it would bob up and down, like as if it's in the water per se. And it can do that indefinitely, which I love as a result. But then talks about weightlessness, in terms of combat and all that sort of thing. So it is a very good and interesting chapter. I think at times, because I struggle with like lots of rules, and like you said, like 1d20 like turns, and it just sort of went over my head a little bit on that. But the way it was written, I didn't feel too bad about it, because I thought, okay, so this is how you could deal with it, and I felt empowered to be like, actually I could just make my own rule up on that, and it's more of here's an example how to do it, rather than
that's it. And that's like this. With all D&D, that's what you can do, isn't it? They give you a basic baseline for it, and you could just say, well, as a person you can survive a minute in combat these days is in combat setting is a long time. Like that is 6 turns in 5e. So you're probably going to get to someone in that time if you needed to get to someone. But you could also make it that you can make up the rule if you want. If you feel like your campaign deserves people being able to get from one ship to another ship and like boarding them or something, and you want that sort of combat in space, then you could say, you can take an hour or something like that, or you can make spells up that give you that, I guess, as well. Like they do have spells that do that as well, I think. There was purify air spells that allow you to because it's not the air runs out, it's the air, well, in modern day term it's the oxygen depletes, but in this game there's no such, I don't think it's really that, it's just the air comes stale and then it becomes toxic.
Exactly, just the different types of and again, which is it's whilst you said like oxygen depleting sounds very scientific, whereas the 3 types of air of like fresh, stale, deadly, toxic, like that makes sense in a fantasy term, because why would they say oxygen? They just air. So I think again, very cleverly written that it is fantasy, just happens to be
also the
space.
fact that they use phlogiston, which is an old scientific term for basically what oxygen is. Which is like
absolutely.
Hydrocarbons. Is that the oxygen, because the phlogiston is something like wood has high phlogiston until you burn it, then it has low phlogiston, which is the thing. But so would make that's why it kind of meets that sort of old, that sort of classical thinking of science, makes sense for it to be that sort of way, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
And just before we go on, so you have a ship, and like I said, we're going to come to all the different kinds of ships. How does one move through the phlogiston? How did we get anywhere? Are we just into space? I don't know. Hamilton, tell me how we get to places.
How we get to places? Well, this is a big question you've asked me. Like, tell me the fundamentals of Spelljammer. Basically, there are ships. Now, these ships can look very much like a normal ship, but these ships have a particular way of moving, which is using basically magical energy, but this is funneled through a thing called a Spelljammer helm, or a Spelljammer, because you can spelljam your Spelljammer while spelljamming, basically, because it's a noun, an adjective, and a verb, basically.
So now, this is my first point. Let's have different words for this.
Yes. I'm on the Spelljammer, using the Spelljammer while some spelljamming in Spelljammer. Is like, it's just, that is a sentence you can say. But the point is, you put on this helm, you have to be a wizard, I think, generally. You have to be a wizard. I think a sorcerer can use it.
It's anyone that's got full spell casting capacity.
Yes.
So like paladins and stuff can do that once they get spell casting and stuff like
That's
that.
It.
From that,
And you basically input spell slots and your spells, and then you have the helms have a particular helm rating. So each ship has different based on its size, based on the helm itself. So you can have a basic helm, and you can have a major helm, and a major and a minor helm. Most of them have a major helm and a backup minor helm, and they have a basically convert magical energy into a speed, which is based on the power of the artifact and the size of the ship, basically, and then that is converted basically by the amount of the level of spell you put into it, basically, and your ability as your sort of spell. We don't want to get too deep into the fact that this is 2e, so there's things like Thaco, and there's things like other things that just it's quite a different beast, but that is the general ruling. And so you expend a spell slot, that then you use a table that converts that into movement. Movement also comes with, there's also things like, there's basically a dexterity to a ship as well. There's a speed, and there's also its ability to turn and move, and that's based on size and rating. So some of them are hefty ships, small light ships like a flitter, which we'll talk about earlier, can basically, in a move without using a move action, can use in a single move action, can turn and then move, whilst like a larger ship can basically turn using one action, then move using one action, then turn, and some of them it's like 2 and then a turn, and then 3 and it's like takes quite a lot of, or every quarter takes an extra move action. So it's very well put together, and actually Jordfan does a very good little playthrough of it, which is quite nice to look at if you want to see someone just doing very simple steps of someone playing the game, and how that means the big ship does this and the little ship goes wee 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 wee, like that, basically. Like the little piggy who went wee 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 wee. That sort of thing.
Or an X-wing was what I was thinking.
Yes,
but yeah, sure.
exactly. Yes, I have a
But yeah,
toddler. This is where my brain goes.
Yeah, that is fair. That is fair.
Yes.
I think for me, yeah. So you could, and I like the fact that you sort of indicated, like, again for our viewers, but for our listeners at home, yeah, you sort of say, oh yeah, they put the helm on, like, on their head, and that's only one type of helm. It's a sort of like a crown of stars, I think that's called. But there's also ones which are just you just sit in a chair essentially, or sit in a throne. So again, very much like Star Trek, you know, the captain's chair and all that sort of thing. I was thinking, I don't know if you've ever read Engage yet. I don't know if you've ever read C.S. Lewis's like Lion, a Witch, and a Wardrobe, but it's like the silver chair, which is that again, that's if someone is not trapped there, but when they're sat there, all their magical energy is being used for the ship. And there was a great little thing I saw, which is like, even once you're paired with the ship, you can't do any other spellcasting. You can do other things. So that, but it gets to a point where if you move away or you go and do something and then you try and cast something magical, the ship, no matter what the range is, will siphon off the magic. And I like that. And it said like, is there any explanation for this? And the book just goes, no.
No, it's magic.
It just happens. And I quite like that. Again, this idea of spell jamming, this idea of magic, it's alive. And it talks about, you know, mages and priests acting as living engines powering these machines. And I just thought, what a great image that is, that you are, you know, powering it. You can still talk, you can still do stuff, but you are extended. Your magic is extended to this, like, it feels like almost like Pacific Rim in a way, you know, when you're moving these big robots per se. It feels very similar to that, which I absolutely loved as a result.
Of like VR headsets from the 80s, and I made when I did an unreleased Christmas special last year for Dragon's Duel, we did one. I had a Spelljammer which was in a what they called an Airstream caravan, and this kid found it. I did it very much like Back to the Future, goes in there and they've got this like guitar and they have it plugged into this like VR headset, and when they play the guitar, it like it's like a bard's. It's a bard Spelljammer, so you go in and you like rock out an electric guitar, go, and then I did it that based on the chord note related to the plane that you went to, because it was a bit like a planar Spelljammer, but that's just really
very cool.
Because they have like you know, you have the chordal tonal ranges for all the planes.
Yeah,
that was why. Anyway, but I'm a nerd, so I'm gonna do these things.
I love that. That is awesome. Moving on, then let's just. Shall we just go talk about ships?
Yes,
I think everyone's here about ships.
Yes, everyone's here for the ships. Let's go to ships. What ships do you want to go to? Let's look at some ships.
So again, in both books, it does talk about all these different ships. And again, and unfortunately, he passed away last year, I discovered. But Jim Holloway is the one who's designed most of these ships in these books. Obviously, there's other books and other ships designs out there. And I think, off the top of my head, and we talked about this before on the Discord, this idea that there's like a Jules Verne / Jerry Anderson feel, like, you know, if you think of like, if anyone ever watched Stingray like I did as a kid, this idea, just the way they're sort of shaped, because they don't look like, as you know, again, because I was thinking like, oh, sci-fi, you know, like they're not blocks or cubes or anything like that, or designed necessarily for streamlining. They are just ships on the ocean, or they are just designed almost like fish. I always think as well.
I love the fish element they brought into it. It's such a like great, like, I don't know, it is that, as you said, that 60s Stingray, Captain Scarlet, all those sort of like amazing, but Stingray particularly, as you said, because it's the underwater one, the sort of that sort of mix of I'm looking at the hammer ship right now, so I've got the hammer ship up, you know, and like that's clearly got a ship's hull, but then this sort of like gills, and then the hammer eyes, which are like really cool little, like, you could imagine people being down and looking at the gun, like the gunner ship bits, and you can,
cinematically you can see the camera going in and going through the eye and seeing somebody there looking out. Absolutely.
I mean, there should have. So I mean, I don't know why. If the new Dungeons and Dragons movie happens and does really well, then there has to at least be a Spelljammer movie series, because I think that would be great. To be honest,
that would be pretty awesome. And what's great with all these, all these ships as well, all these designs. Obviously, you've got the design of them, but there's also a floor plan of them as well.
Yes, so which is useful for generally any time.
Yeah, but again, if you were obviously you've got obviously this image, and then with the little paper cutouts, obviously you can do the big map of like, oh, we're getting closer, and then it's like, right, we're going to board the ship. Like, great, here is what it looks like from the inside. Here are the different rooms and stuff. So you're already pre-planned with that. And there are so many ships in this book, and I know there are so many other ones that aren't included in this book with the later box sets, but I think for me, because you've already mentioned them, I really liked the Elven ships. So we've got the Flitter, we've got the Man of War, and the Armada, sorry. And they are very, again, that idea of a living ship. So they're made out of like I can't remember what it's described as, but like basically when if it's left in space and it's no longer living, it's dying, it sort of curls up like a spider with all the vines and stuff curling up. So again, you can imagine like, you know, a dead fly or a dead butterfly or anything like that. And this idea of, they said the Flitter is the smallest of the ships, and it just flits around and something. It can only be like one person, so it's like a messenger ship almost. And then you have like a big Man of War, which is where
you know, showed,
oh, it's so good. And then the Armada is like this huge, almost like butterfly type one as well, where you get all the Man of Wars. It's like landing on its shoulders and stuff like that. And the whole stuff about like the elves, the lore of that as well, and the reason why they are, and all these councils and stuff, is so just really interesting. And again, just beautiful. But again, I didn't expect that to be a ship. You know what I mean? I was just like, what is that? Is that just like an entity? Is that like a monster in itself? You know, this Flitter, this Man of War, etc. And they're like, no, there are people moving this ship like as one big living creature, as it were.
They are great, and like the ones that I thought were really fun as well, like the Neogi we will talk about, I'm sure, more, but like they're very arachnid style ones. I've got the Mind Spider there, and they've got these little like sails of
almost cobwebs
on, particularly what's the other one, the main Neogi one. Oh, I'm just trying to find it now.
So there's so we've got the Death Spider and like the is it Mind Spider? Yeah.
I try and
Death. Yeah, because this is the other thing as well. And again, back to my very little tiny thing. These ships in this book, the first book, the Arcane Space, sorry, they're not alphabetized, and they're not really done by theme.
No,
and that's really
annoying. Which makes it bloody hard when I'm trying to show people stuff. There's like
exactly, because like you had the Flitter one at the beginning, and maybe it's done by, I don't know, like how biggest ship it is or anything like that. But the Flitter's at the beginning, and then the Armada's like really far away, and you're like, oh no, but you either put the elves together or or put this and the other, like So
organization skills have got much better in D&D. Classic. We talked about that on we talked about the organization on Ghost Walk as well. Like that was quite a difficult thing to navigate in terms of like there was all this lore at the beginning that didn't make sense until you got to chapter 3, and it's like, and the way it was organized was just not on the level that we are used to, which is sort of good.
No, and I think that's again, that's just with time, isn't it? Like over the years, we want to make it accessible to people, that anyone could pick up a book and go, "Ooh, I want to play that," rather than like 2 chapters in, you're like, "Oh, I get it now," because I think because again, it's more us than D&D or the writers or anything like that. It's because our attention spans are so small, and we need to be like hooked like that. As soon as you see as soon as you see a picture, like you said, of like the hammer ship, I'm like, "Oh, well, I'm in."
Yeah, exactly. If that was right at the beginning, I'd be like, "Yes, 100%." Yeah, totally.
Absolutely. I think the one I wanted to talk about, again, not being negative or anything like that. I wanted to talk about the Dwarven Citadels.
I'm just showing it now. I knew you were going to it, so I've just moved down. I love it. Okay, I know what you're going to say. Go on, you say what you say. Go on, say what you say.
I'm going to say, well, again, the lore about why dwarves are in space. Like again, dwarves in space.
Yeah.
Again, great lore, and like because they're again in AD&D, which is such a weird thing to say out loud. They're not magical, or they're not as magically gifted per se. So they rely on forges to power their big rocks in space. So they will hollow out an asteroid or something like that into this thing, and once all the air is used up, they'll go to another asteroid, build into that, and do the same thing. So you have these massive rocks in space. However, I do feel it's very telling about someone to have a massive face on a rock. Like it feels very egotistical. Maybe it is that sort of thing, like the king of the mountain, that sort of thing. But I'm like, really?
I mean, they are made in America, and they have what's that mountain called? Oh, Rushmore, Mount Rushmore.
Phew, I'm glad you got it, because I was going to be really...
Yeah, and it's like, so there is a bit of that in America, but also I think it's kind of cool, because it's kind of like, you hear that sort of like, that proper the sound from what's his name, J.J. Abrams always does, or what Michael Bay, coming soon, you know, like, and it's just this big face coming. I just think that's so like Guardians of the Galaxy-esque sort of like. I love it. I think it's great, and
I think if it was described like that to me, then I would totally
with the holding the axe again
over the top.
As I was mentioning, like the thing that I sort of tagged Ed Greenwood about was I thought, now this is I said architectural nerds out there will know Robert Venturi, and I said about this Las Vegas thing and this whole idea that architecture in like the 80s is, well, he was a bit earlier than that. He was in the sort of 60s, 70s doing this sort of like look at Las Vegas is like, and America's sort of look at these buildings that look like ducks that are, and then the big basket that's actually a shop, or a Stetson that's a cowboy hatch store or something, like making plant and stuff like that. And there was a big architectural movement in that sort of 80s, this sort of Pomo response to sort of modernism and making everything be over the top. Pomo, people might know famously from, there's a building that has like I'll put a picture up if I have time to put of. There's a building which is all held up instead of by like statuesque sort of Grecian gods. It's by the Seven Dwarfs. Have you ever seen this one?
No.
Oh, it's amazing. Outram is the architect, but he did. It's got like it's proper. It's like all Pomo is like bright colours. It was also known the Memphis style as well, and and he did buildings that were like held up by instead of like by Sleepy and Dopey and stuff like that, holding up this building. It's really cool. But that's very cool. That was very en vogue in the 80s, so I kind of see this as maybe a slight reaction to that.
Okay, you've convinced me. I mean, to be fair, it comes from somebody who thinks nautiloids look silly. Now, I will say, nautiloids make sense now. Again, because the way they're drawn and stuff like that. I'm sure, I don't know if you've played Baldur's Gate 3.
Very much only the nautiloid bit. I have no time, but I played that bit.
That is fair. I haven't. I only ever saw the trailer, and I just thought, when I saw the nautiloid in that trailer, I was like, oh, bit rubbish. Which, again,
How?
It says more about me.
I was like, that's so cool, the little like wavy arms moving, and when it puffs out, that's so cool.
No, it creeps me out a little bit, but it makes sense. Again, with all these things like that, like you said, the hammer. The hammer ship, and even like I was gonna say like the dragonfly and the damselfly that they look like I'm gonna say this one, ornithopters. Is that how you say it from Dune?
Yes.
I got it right. Again, nerds, don't ask us. We'll get there eventually. But again, because they look so cool as things, and I'm just like, oh yeah, I want to find out more about those. And so you have like the fish type ones, you have like wasps and bees and all that sort of thing for the lizard men. And so it's that thing was like, not only are you thinking about what flies, but also what is in the ocean and moves through
different types of it's like what moves through other fluids, let's say, or the things exactly. But
then on top of that, then you have stuff like classic ships. So obviously it talks about, there's a galleon or or stuff like that. But then there's a great line saying like, these ships don't really survive too long in space. Because they get up there and they go, oh no, we are not prepared.
Yeah, exactly. The one I liked, again, I think we're big gnome fans. I like the gnomish sidewheeler, and it made me think of. It was very Warhammer, and there's mentions of Warhammer 40k in this, by the way, which is the Xenos or something like that. And I was like, I know what you're referencing. I got you. You know that gif that I got you sort of thing. But that gnomish sidewheeler made me just think of a bit like an orc ship. It's a bit more of like less put together, but it felt a bit like they used to have Battlefield Gothic, which is the ship game that was in the late 90s and noughties I was into. Has that sort of feel, but also just I like the idea that they keep saying that instead of like fixing something, they don't just fix it, they then add to it and make it more. They can't just fix it, they have to like completely tinker with it until it's like got this attachment onto it, and then they keep attaching this bit onto it, and then they keep attaching this bit onto it until it just becomes these humongous thing of just ever expanding and more complicated structures.
I think because it's based on a certain type of gnome. I think it's from the Kryn campaign setting, where again very dark sun, I believe, as well. That idea is like, it's dangerous, I love it. And I think at the beginning I was like, there was a stat which was saying like, whenever a sidewheeler or any sort of gnomish ship design tries to land, there's a 50% chance it will crash. And in my head, I was like, oh, but surely if they're tinkerers and stuff, it should be better than that. But then reading it through, reading about the lore, I was like, no, it makes sense, because all they're caring about is like, oh, we want it bigger, bolder, explosives. Of course, it's going to be like, it's not going to work. Or
they're more chaotic than the gnomes that we've sort of been brought up in the later editions of AD&D, D&D. Sorry, I've got stuck into it now. Where they're more just like specialized in craftsmanship and all that sort of stuff. But like, but I do like the idea of them.
It feels very Borderlands to an extent, you know, like if you're into like your Tiny Tinas and all that sort of thing, and you're just sort of like, yes, great, attach it, you know. And I love like the way it talks about gnomes is like their stuff is garish and awful to the eye and stuff like that. And like you said, like they pick stuff from other sort of cultures and stuff, and it's like an insult to this culture. It's like, how dare you? Like, I'm sure they had something about the dwarves, and they're like, yes, it is better. We've made it better. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. I just love that. But the other thing it made me think of as well was that they were a bit like the Lego Movie, where they're moving along and like constantly building bricks, whilst when they change the ship, when they're flying along, and they're like building the ship along whilst they need to change it into like big wings to move around, and then they kind of like change it a little bit, and then it's like got like a rocket frontage to it, and they just all that sort of stuff. I really love that. That's an idea.
That is fair. I think I guess out of all the drawings and stuff, I do think the side wheeler isn't as bonkers as it could be.
I agree,
but I think but then at the same time, how can you encapsulate something that is that bonkers it's going to crash? Like they've done a good. Jim's done a good job. Like it looks great, but I was like, I'm expecting bits floating off.
Yeah, it needed a bit more of that Warhammer orcish look to it, which is just like plastered on and bits stuck together and sort of falling apart than what they've got. But yeah, they again, as you said, done a good enough job.
Again, I think the writing does it so much justice in this, and like because I know it's building up on Kryn and Darkson and all that sort of thing, but I was just like instantly I was like, ooh, I want to have gnomes in this game. That was the thing
that's
for me.
It. Menoi is the name. I've just seen it there. Menoi gnomes.
Menoi gnomes. Fantastic. What else was I going to say? There's something else I was going to say. Oh, well, shall we talk about beholders and beholder ships?
Yes. Let's talk about beholder ships.
So again, from that forward as well, as you may see, there's like loads of different types of ship, and they're all different designs and stuff. And I love the little story that was included, like, Jim did some designs and was very surprised when everyone said yes to all of them.
Yes.
And I love this because it talks about the beholders, again, very Dalek in a way, this very Doctor Who sort of thing, where they strive for perfection, but even in themselves, so that when they come across another beholder fleet, they're like, oh, they're not us. Oh, you know, so you can have different like beholders on the battlefield or on the thing, and whilst you can deal with one, doesn't mean you're going to have the same reception with another because you've dealt with them. And I like that, this whole sort of almost like political sort of thing between themselves that you could get wrapped up in. And the different shapes of these ships and the different ways they look, I think that's great, because again, going back to what I was saying sort of a little bit at the beginning, there was a section where it talks about like, what do you do if your players already know every single monster in the monster manual, which is a common theme, and it just says just describe it differently, or just describe things. It doesn't matter as long as you don't use its name. And this advice was like from 30 years ago, and I'm like, I'm doing that now. I'm
exactly.
going, just don't name it. Just describe it as differently as you can. So, and I think that's what you would do with these different beholder ships and stuff. Like, you might not be able to tell it's a beholder ship from the off, but like as soon as you get close, you're like, whoa, horrible.
Yes,
horrible.
And the lore with that as well, that they're now, they live in hives. It's more hive-like. There's like a sort of queen system, sort of like very much like bees. Which is kind of I just thought it was they're kind of cool ideas that they have with them, and that they can be friendly, they can be aggressors, and and the ships, as I said, they're sort of very much like, remind me a little bit like those Matrix sort of like the sort of things that flew along and
Sentinels,
then Sentinels, that was it, a little bit like that, and obviously like eye sockets, obviously, because classic, they're beholders.
But and again, the way they move, the way they spell jam, I don't know if that's the word for it, but they have obviously they have the hive queen, or the person in charge, because again there's a whole section saying beholders are gentless, so the queen is not a good thing. You're like, okay, whatever, we'll call it a queen because it makes sense. But they have, I'm going to say this wrong now, is it Orbus, the little beholders around, and they sort of these milky white, almost mage-like sort of beholders, small, almost I guess spectres in a way, just linking up together. And those are the ones that push through.
Shit.
And so you take those out instead of like taking out the main spell.
Beholder, yeah.
Oh yeah. So again, I would hate to be like, you see this ship coming, go, okay, don't worry, just take out don't do anything till you see the whites of their orbises, you know.
Yeah, it's graphical, as they would say.
It's very graphical, and it can, and I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong on this, Hamilton, but it can use like their sort of rays as a ship.
Just look at that. Yeah, you can do the charm, person, monster, sleep, telekinesis, flesh to stone, and disintegrate, because why not?
Disintegrate. Yeah. Very, very cool.
These are there's 3 general types of beholders bred to the task of space. This is a common beholder, and then there's the what was the orbi, that was it, 1 to 6 orbi surround the central queen, as you said, which is genderless, so the leader. And then these they do the Spelljammer. They channel the energy of one beholders into the motive force, and the orbis can do this as long as one common beholder is in the circuit, but needs but they don't provide the direction of movement, they just provide the spell power. So it's the leader queen that does the actual directional control.
That makes sense. And of course, we sort of mentioned them briefly, but obviously Mind Flayers, Illithid are a massive part of Spelljammer as well. You get the whole sort of lore and stuff, and the way they sort of use their helms as well. They've got like series helms and pool helms, where essentially, you know, they all, there's again a couple of them moving the ships along, but like this idea of a pool helm was to put like elder brains in and stuff like that. So it's just it sounds creepy and scary. Like this if you've ever seen, I can't remember which book it is, I think it is Vela's Guide to Monsters, this idea of like here's what Mind Flayers are, and here's I think it's actually Moral Guidance, never mind. But and here's an example of a lair. And you're like, now this lair is now moving towards you at great speed. You know.
Yeah. And I mean, they are freaky, to put it nonetheless. And like they put themselves near settlements, and it's like, are they there just to, you know, are they there just to be friendly, to sort of make some trade, or are they there just to eat brains? Like that was the sort of put out. Which but they are them and beholders get like a slightly different sort of take on them as well, like, which is quite nice that they've and elves as well, and some of the races do get like a different twist to them, I guess, to be spacefaring. Like the elves are trying to create this global elvish empire, which reminded me very much of like Vulcans a little bit, but that's probably me being too obvious about it. But that sort of Romulans Vulcan sort of thing, and they went through a bit of a dodgy time in this with their whole Unhuman War, which was kind of, I don't know,
with the orcs,
with the orcs and stuff, which is kind of, I didn't get too deep into reading it because it kind of just like brushes over this idea, but there is
I kind of hope so. Again, just for the podcast, this idea that the orcs did have a huge space nation, as it were, and then this war happened, and now there's only clusters of them left, and that kind of is a shame, I guess. Again, I know previous editions of D&D obviously talk about orcs being evil, less so now, and I think that's my one hope for when it is released as 5th edition, that orcs do get a big like reboot, and they do have a home planet again, or they have because it'd be nice to have that, like to have and all the classical races, I know, finger things there, but like it'd be nice to have like, actually here's a different kind of culture, here's a different thing. because obviously,
Yeah.
again, it is ships in space.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, of course you're gonna have a ghost ship.
Yeah, there's
or an
ghost ships,
undead
which is great. Yeah.
I love that. And they have our own little bit of lore, or how a ghost ship works and where you'd find them. And I was like, again, really cool encounter that you could just very Sea of Thieves, I guess, as well. That idea is like, what's that music? Oh my god, shit. What about you? Was there any other races that you were like, oh, these are really cool, these are really interesting?
I think just I like the arcane. I thought they were interesting. Just an interesting little like thing that felt like, okay, there's a little starter for you here. They're sort of this humanoid race. I'll try and find a picture of them if I can, in a minute. But they've got these sort of elongated fingers, and they are sort of humanoid, but they're the mysterious sort of tradespeople of
the arcane.
Yeah, the arcane. Yeah,
the blue people.
The blue people. Yes, exactly.
They feel like a more sophisticated Mr. Meeseeks. I always think like we're gonna bring all these magic items to you.
Yeah. Exactly. I think they what's the one that they? There you go. There's the image. Can't think of it now. I can't think of it. It's gone. It's gone. But anyway, there's a picture there of them, and they're sort of they're sort of these secretive race that are the only people that deal with the Neogi as well. They've got like some sort of deal with them. The Neogi we talked about in our Minx and Boo as these spider-like creatures that with furry backs that basically want to imprison everyone and eat them. Yep. And they have and then they bite each other to make these sort of like when they try and make a baby one, it's like
the lore is awful.
Yeah, it's really like creepy spider stuff, which is like, no thank you.
If you're not, I will say, if you're not into your spiders, ignore anything about the Nagoni, because they are furry spiders. They are planar creatures in a way that they go and get magic items, but they will, as we saw with the Minsk and Boo, that idea that they'll wager up going, actually, you'll make a good slave, and then try and capture you in the ship. And obviously in Spelljammer we've seen it before, these death spiders and mind spiders that, again, beautifully ships. I guess it's just the way the arms are sort of created. They're not like bolted on. They're not like mechanical, maybe steampunk-esque per se. It's just like beautifully crafted, almost like a brooch.
Yes,
I was thinking, or like a hairpin. Beautiful, but also if I saw that coming across the map towards me, I'm like, we need to go. Round, black alert. Let's get out of here.
Exactly. No, I really like that. I think the other thing with the arcane was that they showed this next image, which is they're like holding like a hat, wearing like a secretive sort of cloak, which made me just think of the tiny people from Star Wars. What are they called? The sand.
The little scavengers that have the big ship.
What are they called?
Oh no! Again, our geek cards have been revoked long ago.
My brain just can't compute all this stuff at the same time. But there's a picture of this sort of like cloaked figure, and then they've got the Spelljammer in the background and a galleon ship, and you just kind of think this sort of like secretive, like, I can do some deals, like, here's like do you need I can get you a damselfly for under 500.
What are you buying?
Yeah, exactly.
What are you selling?
Yeah, exactly. That sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, you just sort of mentioned Spelljammer as sort of the background. Yeah. Let's talk about the Spelljammer.
Yes.
The Spelljammer.
The Spelljammer.
So, again, very little, I guess, compared to the other ships and stuff, where I guess they're more common, perhaps, or anything like that. But the actual sort of Spelljammer itself, the original ship, there's very little on it, and I know it gets expanded out into the further campaigns and in the novels and stuff. But from what I understand, is that it is a proper living ship. It's sort of a cross between a manta ray and a scorpion, with a city or a little fortress built on it, which is really, really cool. And again, you get a map of it in the box as well.
Got it up here now. Yep.
Nice. There it is. I think with what I find really interesting, and the first time I read this through, it made it sound like the Spelljammer, nobody knows anything of it. It comes and goes. People have tried to capture it, and other people have captured it, but it's never, it's just a thing. It's a mythical thing. So in my head, I was like, well, why have you included a map of it? Because it's such a mystical thing. It's like no one's ever controlled it. But as soon as you give a map of it, I'm like, well, now the players are going to go and try and get it, or go and search for it, or something like that. And I just felt, to me it feels very magical, almost like it's a mythical creature that you rarely see, like like Ash in Pokemon sees Ho-Oh at the beginning, and you never hear anything about it until maybe several seasons in,
But I think it's that, isn't it? It's like when you get to level 20, you got to meet the Spelljammer by then, haven't you? It's like Dungeons.
Yeah.
It's like Dungeons and Dragons. We've talked about this. It takes a bloody long time to meet that frickin' dragon. So it's like in Spelljammer, you should be able to meet the Spelljammer, right?
You're completely right in this. When I read it through again and then read a few other articles about it, it actually expands out a lot of it. I think it's just interesting that this was obviously the starting point for me as a jumping off point, and then it goes into things. So it is a living ship. It's where all other Spelljammers have come from. So once it has chosen a captain, it will birth all these other Spelljammers known as small jammers, which I think is so cute. And they'll go out and obviously become, go out into the world. And then once one of them is chosen to be the next Spelljammer, so it's not just one. And then it has this thing. Again, I don't remember where I read this, so apologies in advance. Where it attracts people to come and live on it. Essentially, like when you land, it's like you want to stay here, a bit like any of those planes of existence. So if you're going to capture it, that's like one thing. But as soon as you're there, you're like, well, I never want to leave. And I just thought that was really cool. And it's got various attacks. Like one of its attacks is using the people that have settled on it to attack you. It has a tail and it has maneuverability, and it just has all this stuff to it. It's an incredible. Out of all of them, it is a living ship. I know we talked about the elves types of ship, but they're sort of like wooden trees and stuff. This feels like an actual.
Yeah, the other ones have that sort of exactly. The other ones have a look. I've got a bionic, like I can't. What's the biophilic? It's not the word, is it? But it's that sort of like they look they look like biology. They look like real living things, but they're actually just wood and carved and made into these things. They're not actually the spider. Death Spider isn't a spider body. It's just given that sort of shape, and the hammer ship is the same. It's just it's a wooden hull, but it's been shaped like a hammerhead.
Exactly.
But this is actually a humongous manta ray ship, basically, that is living.
Yeah, and I know later on there's stuff like again, forgive me, I can't remember the actual terminology for it, but it's like a dolphin ship or a whale ship. I think it's a whale ship where it's like it is a whale, but it has two parts of it on and stuff like that. So there are, I know, or imitations or limited, but I think because this is so big, and as you said, like it feels like something that you go and explore when you're level 20 or in the high levels, because it has saves equal to a level 20 wizard. It's like magic doesn't really work against it or anything like that. It's his own thing, and it's so big and massive, just like what you were thinking about before about the crystal shells and stuff like that. It is sort of one of those things where you see it and you can't really comprehend what it is other than a living creature. Again, I see myself, if it ever came to it, like, we're gonna have to do a Free Willy thing where it does get captured and it's gonna go Spelljammer. Whoa! Smack in the face. That's how you go.
I love that. That is great. I'm so up for that. Do we need to talk about the sort of fundamentals of how gravity works and the air works, or do we not? That's just stuff that you can read?
We've talked about it a little bit, and I think it is again good ideas. For me, like a little bit technical, but once you work it out, same thing with what you were saying before about this maneuverability and stuff like that. I think once you've had a go at it yourself and worked it out, it actually gets a lot easier as well. I think it's always that thing where I've said before that when you're reading a board game, you're like, I don't understand it, but if you start playing it through, you get the hang of it, but you just need that patience for it. But like the air, the gravity, the time, the temperature,
the speed that you move through things. Like when you start moving, you get up to a speed, and then you move at basically the speed of light to get between these speeds. Even though it's like big distances, it doesn't take a lot for you to ramp up to speed. Then you stay at this like high speed, and then you move along. And then when you encounter things, because each thing has a gravity, it's like I think that's how Jordan Fan put it actually themselves, was it's like encounters in like Final Fantasy 7, when you're in the world map, that when you get close to something, it goes and then you slow down because you've got gravity to one another, and then you sort of like battle it out, and then you just speed off again when you get away from things. And the same with like, or No Man's Sky is a good example, isn't it? It's that sort of No Man's Sky, you kind of use you use the sort of booster, and then when you get close to a planet, it slows down, and then you kind of and you change these sort of speeds. So it's quite cool.
Yeah, very cool. I think the only last thing I was going to say, back into the first book, the Arcane Space, it talks about planetary displays,
Yeah.
and this idea that you can draw out the different planets and actually make your own sort of solar systems and stuff like that. So if you were going, and I thought that was really cool because it does say, like, at the beginning, it's just like you may want to just base it on what we know, but actually before you go into space, do consider like making, you know, just a couple in this wild space of your homebrew world. And I thought that was great. And again, a little bit too in depth for me, as I'm sure at some point if we go through it and just create our own display map or anything like that, I mean, it will look very, very cool. It's a little bit technical for my liking, but I like that idea that, and as soon as you say the word star charts, I'm like, ooh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Even though I have no idea how to read it, how to create it, or where I'd put it. But I'm like, ooh. So I think I love that idea that it's not just creating, like, here's a solar system. It's like, how do you look at it on a map? And creating that map and that sort of handout. Because, again, your players would want to know that sort of thing. Like, as soon as they land on the planet, they're like, well, we need to find out where are the other planets, and drawing that stuff out. Because you always have maps of your regions and stuff on a fantasy setting. Why not space?
The ones that I think are quite good and that did them, I'm going to go back to Warhammer because I've read a few Warhammer books, like all the Abnett books, so the Ravener and Eisenhorns, which are really good if you haven't read any of them. But they have a star map in it, and it's actually really well put together because it's like, you know, you think of it as a three-dimensional thing, but they do it very well in a two-dimensional way, giving it some sort of texture and movement and space that has like the warp rifts and all these things that are very Warhammery. But I think, like, if you want some inspiration, that's a good place to look for some sort of like star map representations, on top of, I'm sure there's millions of others out there that are great, but if you're looking for ones that aren't just our solar system, there's that.
I think and yet I think the only other thing I was going to mention, because it talks about, I know I've mentioned this before, so maybe we'll cut this, I don't know, but like I said, sometimes you're like, well, I don't know what to do, and I know I've gone on about it, this idea that they coexist, they don't outweigh or they don't overwhelm each other, the systems. So, for example, if you do have, we haven't mentioned them so far, the GIF, like, oh no, their race is all about gunpowder, black powder, that sort of thing. But if you're like, oh, I don't want, because people get obsessed with muskets and guns, and I've had this before in the podcast, so I won't go too much into it. But if you're just like, I don't want that, you could do what I believe it's, I must be Greyhawk, I'm going to get this wrong, where you could just say, it doesn't work in this planet. Yeah. So you could have all this stuff, and it's just like, it doesn't work until you take it off planet or you do something else. And I think, I love that. You could just be like, certain things don't work here, so these things don't work here, so you have to rely on stuff. Like, I've been in games where your magic doesn't work and you have to roll under the spell level, so if you're roll over, so if you were casting a level 1 spell, you have to get, you know, over 10 and over, but if you're rolling 5, well, that's like 5th in level, you know,
Mechanis, you always roll average, for example. Like there's it's a theme that's been put into the raw, if let's say, that sort of idea. Like there are things in, this is space, like, come on, it's magic, you can do what you like. But,
and
like,
that's it, it's magic. It's not physics or anything like that. Right. It's magic. So in certain crystal spheres and certain wild spaces, magic rules are slightly different, and you just have to accommodate for that. And I think that's great, as you can use that as a justification as a DM, because obviously, let's face it, as soon as you find a gun in D&D, you're like, great, I've got a gun, I'm much better than everyone else. And then you realise how crap
they are when you, like, exactly. the thing that my, like, so in my Waterdeep Dragon Heist campaign that we had, they were trying to sneaky. One person was a gunslinger, so it was just like, I then attack with my gun. Okay, so everyone hears that because it's a gun. Like, it's not like stab. We've got silencers. You don't cut the throat and that's it. It's just like there's a big explosion. So so it was just they could never sneak anywhere.
That's brilliant. I love that.
Which has made it quite fun, because it's like, well, now you've got 100 guards to deal with. Like, you know, how are you going to get through this?
Job.
Yeah, good job.
Yeah. The final thing I was going to talk about was the Rock of Brawl.
Oh yeah.
So we've sort of talked about this idea that, you know, again, it feels very much like, well, what if you need to have a Deep Space Nine moment and stop somewhere, or you know, that's the thing. And this gives a great example. It's very, again, I'm going to compare it to the Minsk and Boo and Explorer's Guide to Wildmount and Sword Coast Adventures, where it's just basically, here is a place. Here is stuff you should know about it and stuff. It doesn't have the breakdown of like, oh, it has this many people on it or anything like that, because obviously it's just written as a story, and it has a great little bit of lore, has great little bits and pieces, and the sort of cross section of it as well that's sort of shown in one of the books is really interesting. So I think if you were looking for a place where it's like, well, we want a spaceport of some sort where there's going to be some smuggling, there's going to be some medieval politics, there's going to be some history of piracy and bandits, and a festival ground. Where else would you go but the Rock of Bral?
Yeah.
Which I love that as a thing. I guess because I think for me, it's a good starting point if you're like, I don't know where to take my players.
Yes.
Instead of just hopping from planet to planet to planet, maybe they want to go and actually integrate with people who are like, hey, we should team up and go on where would you get your missions in space? You know what I mean? Like this is their fantasy version of a tavern per se. It's like, here is the Rock of Bral. You're going to be sent on runs and stuff like that. So I really like. I
like the Deep Space Nine reference. That's actually quite a good. That is a very good. It's that sort of space station-y feel.
So much fun.
Yeah, I mean, and you could just make your own again. Like you could just make your own one. I think there's a really cool. What's the other? There's a few of them, but I was thinking in High Rollers, they go into space in the later High Rollers ones, and then they make they make the world's makes them basically off the planes. He sort of bases them off the planes, and they're named after Elysium. And when they go to Elysium, they have the sort of like spaceport, and they're trying to get themselves off the ship. And it's a great sort of, and you could just do that, or whatever you want, but make it just a spaceport. But this is like another like, here's a map, here's something that's got some lore, which is what we want. It's always like, we were talking about this in the other editions, it's stuff, and there's more 5e stuff. It's like, give us an example, because it's always there as a backup, because we might not have time to make our own one, but in the same it's not saying you can't just make your own one up as well. But,
no, absolutely not. And I really like this one. I think so. I guess my stuff with Minsk and Boo and stuff like that was a lot of like, here's some examples, but there wasn't a lot of lore. Here you have a whole backstory, and then not many examples, so it needs to be a happy medium for myself, just to have that little bit more signposting. Again, because I came to it in 5th edition, and that's how I find the reading of it. But I was like, the whole history about how it was handed down, and this idea of piracy, and the successor was there for a week, and then it was found dead, floating in space, and they've not solved the murder. And I'm like, ooh, that's exciting.
Yeah, exactly. Ooh. No, it's really good. And the other thing that's brought me on, and it's a bit changing a little bit, but like the adventure hook things that they talk about in the book are very good. Like the way to start, how do you get yourself into space? And they have a whole section that dedicates you to like, they give you the anchor drops from the sky is one of them, which is my favorite one, which is like, there's anchor drops, so you've just defeated you've beaten the world boss, you've saved Waterdeep or something like that, and this anchor drops down, and hey, we need you to come to space and save the universe. That's great. And the first adventure I mentioned it, which was called Wild Space, which is a really good, big spoiler warning, but I won't know if I should give away the spoiler, but there is a big spoiler that you get picked up.
It's been 30 years, and
it's been 30 years. So basically, the idea is this captain comes up called John Tobart, and asks you to come and help him get the Ravager, which is this like horrible, eats everything, sort of like mega weapon. Seems that he's trying to says he's stopping it, but actually it turns out they're a beholder in disguise and they're using you to come and help them so they can come back and destroy your planet, which is a great twist. But what a good it's a great story, and it has that whole brings you up into space and gets you there.
It gets you into it. It's Doctor Who, it's Star Trek, it's like all those things where you're like, wait, it was a baddie all along. Yeah, yes, we all people except me saw that coming. And I'm sure, again, if anything, we could sort of rounding this sort of episode to a close. I think I'm excited for next year. I'm really excited to see what is going to happen, because from these 2 books essentially, and all the miniatures and all that sort of thing, I'm actually going, there's so much we can do with this. And it, like I said, I was a bit snooty about it. I was like, no, but it's just sci-fi, and it's not.
It's so not. Yeah.
And I'm actually very excited because it's not relying on pew pew laser guns. No. It's not relying on pew pew laser guns. Pew pew laser. I know lasers don't make noises, by the way, before people put that in the chat. Like, oh, they don't make noises.
Well, actually.
But I think for me it was just such a different way of looking at it. So that's why now in my head I'm like, it's D&D, in space rather than science fiction. So that
Yeah.
I'm having to unlearn that.
But
as well.
all
So
of
I'm
that comes
excited
with
to see
as
what they
well,
do
which
that.
is like it's not knights and paladins in space. Of course it is, but it's actually like taking it to that other level by adding in another whole layer of awesome conceptualization really and creativity that makes it the only like I'm actually in awe of all the people that come up with all these ideas, because they just put like this Planescape puts the whole sigil thing and all the way that's added this whole layer onto it. They've done the same with Spelljammer, or they did the same before even with Spelljammer, and I just want to go adventuring in space now because it's so cool.
I guess I hope with the release of the new campaign, like they did with Eberron, there is some sort of like little starter adventure or little one shot. I'm sure there will be. I'm sure they will do that. But I would love to see what that's like and see.
But if not,
like, would it be?
Yeah. If not, they've got these great adventures already. So once they've converted it to 5e, I mean, you kind of think, come on, guys, you could just do one of them. Do you know what I mean? Like,
well, I mean, people have been crying out for ages about it, and like I now understand, guys. Okay, I'm late to the party. I get it.
Yeah.
So you can stop shouting at me now.
Converted. Officially.
I know,
converted.
Officially, 5th edition converted. Hamilton, thank you so much for joining me on my discovery of Spelljammer. I appreciate it, and as soon as you showed me one of the pictures, I was like, oh well, now we have to look at this now, because I threw it off there. But what is happening with Dragon's Duel? What's going on at the Roleplay Factory? What's going on?
What is going on? Well, on Saturday, so this is more live than we've ever been, because we're recording on a Tuesday for a Thursday, so like in the same week.
It's hot.
Which makes it nerve-wracking for editing purposes. So therefore, if there is bad editing, it's don't blame the editor, because it's my fault for organisation skills. But
it's both of our faults for being very busy people. So,
with that, we have got we've got episode 2 of our game show happening on Saturday night, which is at night. So everything that's going to be Dragon's Duel now is Saturdays at 9 p.m. UK time, 4 p.m. Eastern time, which is the same as when this is on a Thursday. So if you just tune in the same time every day, 2 out of those 7 days, you'll find us. Just come on at 9 o'clock, just check the Roleplay Factory, see what's there, and you'll probably find something 2 out of 7 days. But on those Saturdays, we're doing the second of our game shows, we've got Nicola, we've got Chelsea, we've got Chloe and Chris. There's a lot of CHs and I love alphabetizing everyone. So I'm like, there's oh no, there's how's it cooked? Say HR. I'm having to really do my ABCs to understand this one. But it's going to be fun. We're going to be playing some good games. We're going to be playing one of my favourites, which is Confusion, which I don't think you played. You played Mind Flayer Athletics, which is very on point.
I was very bad at that game.
We did that last week, so I try and change them up. So Confusion is where you play basically the drinking game 21s. You ever played that game?
And
you have to do that, but so when you make a mistake, you have to add a new rule to the game, and it just gets completely confusing.
No.
So I'm looking forward to putting that on everyone. And
flashbacks to uni days.
Yes, exactly. Yes. But so we fortunately don't add the alcohol to it. But I mean, people can if they so wish. If you so wish to drink at home to our games, I take no responsibility for any damage that you take. But so that's what we're doing, and then we'll have a Christmas special, hopefully the week after. We are hoping. If not, it might have to be pushed until the week after, and we're just going to do some backstory stuff. But that is just dependent on timescales, because actually it's all very tight at the moment, because as you might know, it's Christmas, and therefore everyone's busy.
Everyone's busy. Everyone has suddenly important duties like family and work and holidays. Bastards. No, absolutely, totally understand. It is unfortunately the way of the world. As soon as December hits, you're like, well, no one's going to respond to my emails for at least 2 months. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, what about you, Fiona? What about you? Yeah.
Me? Wow. Well, when I'm not finding out about Spelljammer for the first time, I obviously run What Am I Rolling, which is a twice-monthly RPG one-shot podcast. As always, it's going very, very well. We're going to have Numenera coming out at some point.
Ooh.
I've just only learned how to say that, because I was struggling for ages. It's a brilliant system.
Did you get the bundle on Humble Bundle?
I did get the bundle on Humble Bundle.
Is that because I told you it was on Humble Bundle?
Yes,
Yay! I get a win! I win!
You got a win! So that's coming out. I'm going to do some solo stuff because currently I'm stuck in a cupboard, so I'm going to have to do that to to pass the time.
To keep myself sane.
As I was saying, what I'm sure I'll be promoting loads at when it gets closer to January, though. I'm part of a sci-fi improv show that's coming out. Yes, sci-fi, where it's going to be in person, but also streamed online and also in VR. And it's very much like if you've ever watched Galaxy Quest or any of those sort of like Red Dwarf is a good example. It's just people like on a ship, which essentially the Earth has been sucked into a black hole and they're flying away from it, but they're flying at the same speed that they're being sucked back into it. So they're currently stuck, and it's about what happens, and you can interact. It's so much fun. You have an alien called Biscuit. You have Dr. Fleischman, who's a bit like Dr. Venkman. You have basically Arnold Rimmer as the captain. It's all fantastic work, and I'm just playing a very tiny role of just being in the chat. So probably what I'm doing right now, just like and responding to requests and stuff like that as the big ship AI.
Cool.
And that will be happening in January. There'll be lots of show dates. I'm sure we'll be spamming people about that.
Was it going to be on YouTube?
Where?
Twitch?
It's going to be on YouTube. It's going to be on YouTube.
Oh, because it's VR, currently. I guess. So yeah, you need to do.
Yeah,
can I watch that on a PlayStation VR?
Oh, I do not know. I will find out.
If you could, because that's the only VR headset I own.
Well, you own one more than I do.
Well, it's the only one I own. I've used it not a lot since the first year I got it. I was like, yeah, VR, and then it's now in a cupboard. it's in that box there.
Oh, it's along with all the musical instruments.
Yeah.
You could do the drums and the VR. Anyway, what I do love about it though, so obviously if you're in the audience, you are part of the sleepers. So that means you are passengers on the ship and you can interact with it there. If you are in VR, you're another crew member, so you could be just in the background waving whilst they're doing their scenes.
Doing that.
Yeah, exactly. And then if you're in the chat with me, you are from Mission Control and you're sending requests to the characters, which I then pass on to people, but also kick people out if they're being rowdy. So
yes,
it's always a way to try it. We don't know if it's going to work.
Sounds awesome. It sounds absolutely awesome.
It's so much fun.
Yeah.
I'm one of those things where I'm just like, I hope it looks good and is like, it's that sort of thing where it just needs tweaking. I think we're at that stage, so I'm very excited for when that's out, and the artwork looks great for it as well.
Exciting.
So that's what I'll be doing in January. So yes.
Awesome. Hey, that's really cool. Okay. Is that everything then? Is that everything?
I think that's everything. Oh no, I forgot. Third Space Gaming.
Oh yeah, Third Space Gaming. Yes.
Third Space Gaming. I always forget this. I'm so sorry. Burnley. If you want 10% off, hey, I hear Christmas and the festive season is there. If you want 10% off, it might be a bit late now, actually thinking about it when this goes out. If you want 10% off your first purchase at Third Space Gaming, which is your friendly local game store in Burnley, just type in the offer code DMBC into checkout to get 10% off, and that could be on anything. Strixhaven has just come out. They do alt covers, I have found out, so you can go get one of them. Hey, we talked about Warhammer. Maybe in the future when the Spelljammer comes out and Hamilton's predictions of minis come out for Spelljammer, you can get them there probably. I made a promise.
You made a promise that you cannot complete, but that's fine.
No, but do check them out. Again, I think as I've discovered over the last year, like it's been so lovely to actually go into a game store and talk to somebody and be like, I'm very excited, and they're like, we're excited you're here. So go support them. Go support your local game store. Look at the alt covers. Look at other RPGs as well. That's sort of my message for now. But yes,
100%.
That is the thing for that. So yeah.
With that, then there is nothing more to say than catch you on the flip.
Catch you on the flip side.
Catch you on the flip side.
Love you.
Love you.